But first and foremost here, talking about the war that's going on between Israel and Iran. Israel launched what they refer to as a preemptive strike against Iran, killing some of their military generals, killing some of their nuclear scientists, striking Tehran multiple times. Tehran responding by striking several different cities in Israel, Haifa, Tel Aviv, I think a few other cities in the southern Israel. This back and forth bombardment's been going on for over a week now, and it seems imminent that the United States will be joining in with the offensive strikes. Apparently, Donald Trump right now is considering using these bunker bombs to go into Tehran and go after their what they refer to as their nuclear facilities. But I'm pretty skeptical that it would just be that if they go ahead and do that. But before we get into all the different details here, James, I know that you've been following this quite a bit. What are your thoughts on what exactly is going on between Israel and Iran? And I guess my first question to you is, do you think the United States should be involved in this in any way?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but to answer that last question just very directly, I don't think the United States should be involved in it because I just don't see how it's in our national interest to do so, to
Yeah.
fight another foreign war. And I just, looking at everything, I just don't think we're in a spot to be able to do that as a nation. I mean, if you look at the Iraq war, that was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A little over 20 years ago. I think everybody would agree that the country is in a different position. We were much stronger 20 years ago, and look at what that did to our country. Not just the region, the Middle East and how everything is all screwed up now, but just looking at our country, we were in a much stronger position
Yeah.
financially, economically. We didn't have as much debt, in infrastructure. All this stuff has declined over the last 20, 25 years. And I just don't think our resources are best spent on fighting another foreign war, especially since it's not quite clear what we would be getting out of this foreign war.
It seems as though that the main objective here is just to help Israel. And that is the part that I am just baffled by. When you hear senators like Ted Cruz, he had a conversation with Tucker Carlson recently, like trying to cite like biblical reasons why they needed to help Iran or help Israel against Iran. You hear so many like neocons talking about like, oh, we can't let Iran get a nuclear weapon, but it's like, but Israel has nuclear weapons, and if nuclear weapons are such a problem, then why aren't you rolling tanks into Moscow? Why aren't you rolling tanks into Beijing? Like these are countries who you consider to be hostile nations. They have nuclear weapons. I mean, like it seems a little baffling to me that
Yeah, I don't think they figured out a coherent message on that, especially
right,
in that Tucker interview. It did expose a lot of fallacies from a logical perspective of what exactly are we doing over there. You throw out this conversation. First off, is difficult to have sometimes because of the anti-Semitism claims that
right.
because why are we so focused on Israel? There's other countries that are causing all kinds of things in the world. Why are we so focused on this one? Poor Israel, this kind of thing. But then if you look at some of the other components of this issue, it's like, okay, if Iran had nuclear, we wouldn't be doing this. Like, we just don't go in and bomb China. We don't go bomb North Korea. We don't do these kinds of things is because they have a deterrent. So that means if Israel's comfortable lobbing missiles and killing their scientists and their top negotiators and people in their military, that probably means that they're pretty confident that Iran's not going to be able to strike them back with any sort of major force. I know there have been some bombing in
Right.
cities around Israel, but I think the damage has been fairly minimal. Although it is sort of interesting to see them cry over, oh my God, they're bombing the hospitals and they're targeting civilians. And I just don't, I don't see how, I don't know how they're not self-aware about what they're saying. It's like
It's mind-boggling. It is truly mind-boggling. Yes, because for those who may not know, I don't know how you wouldn't know at this point, but they have leveled basically every hospital and every single medical facility in Gaza over the last 2 years now, almost 2 years now. And they've never really cared about that whatsoever. They were like, oh, that's just the cost of war. It's just these things just happen. Or Hamas was underneath hospitals. That's the justification they used quite a bit, even though we are seeing reports that the IDF does have military installations underneath hospitals in Israel. So it's one of those, every accusation is actually an admission kind of a thing. So, yes, we are seeing now these back and forth different missile barrages. And the question kind of just lies on Donald Trump. What is he going to do now? He seems to be very much adamant that, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. So all of his language kind of leans towards the fact that it seems like he's going to get the U.S. more involved in all of this. And James, I don't think that people truly understand what will come out of all of this because, maybe people didn't really feel the effects of the Iraq war. Maybe they didn't really feel the effects of the war in Afghanistan. But I just don't think people truly understand just how devastating this would be for America if we got into another war like those wars, but with Iran this time around. What do you think?
I think it would be really bad from a domestic perspective, just from the lack of attention and resources spent domestically trying to fix the roads and bridges. I read something like 26 or 36% of bridges is going to collapse over the next 20 years, something like that.
Yeah.
We have disinvestment in various communities in America. We have people who can't afford to eat and all this stuff. Because I don't honestly, I don't think Americans are necessarily opposed to bombing some other countries. Really, this is kind of controversial to say. If we're doing well, if we're living lavishly, like yeah, let's take out the Ayatollah, no problem. But the problem now is, why are we doing that when we can't even take care of our own people? Like, why are we over there? Is it and then the reason given is sort of, oh, it's to protect Israel. And then the conversation becomes, well, why are we doing that? Is it in our best interest? Are we getting something from this out of this relationship, or are we not? That's not clear to me. And it seemed like the other day in the exchange with Tucker and Ted, Ted Cruz didn't seem to be able to articulate anything coherent, because he was also on the other hand saying, oh yeah, the Ayatollah is trying to murder Trump. And then Tucker goes, well, should we go in and bomb them right now? Then if they're trying to take out our president, why are we not declaring war immediately? And then saying,
That
I
that,
don't, well,
that
because
was
they're weak.
actually
Yeah, that was
that was
really
the biggest
interesting.
gotcha of the whole entire thing as far as
Yeah,
I was concerned.
right. Because then Ted Cruz goes, well, they're weak. And then Tucker goes, well, if they're weak, then why are we so worried about them?
No, I mean,
And the whole thing goes back to, because the
yeah,
whole thing is like, I think, from my understanding, Netanyahu is dealing with some corruption charges, all
yeah,
kinds of domestic issues. His government is about to fall apart. And so
right,
he's doing everything he can to stay in power. And one way to do that, obviously, would be to continue wars. That's why Gaza has continued. That's why he doesn't really have any incentive to free the hostages, the Israeli hostages
yeah,
in Gaza. Now he's starting a new war here with Iran, just to kind of keep the coalition together, keep him in
right.
power, maybe out of jail. And that to me seems like the most logical or reasonable, assessment of what's going on. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's what you think as well.
I mean, it seems as though, for those who have not been seeing, there have been protests in the streets of Tel Aviv calling for Benjamin Netanyahu to stand down. And a lot of people in Israel have been upset with the way that the genocide in Gaza has been going on. They wanted there to be more of an emphasis on getting the hostages home. I think even the people in Israel realize that Benjamin Netanyahu has been pulling their chain, not really trying to prioritize making sure that the hostages are coming home, but rather just continuing to destroy this entire area. So yeah, he's not the most popular figure right now, and I think he knows that as soon as everything that is going on in Gaza, or the strikes going back and forth between Israel and Yemen, or now with Iran, once that all comes to a close, his government will also come to a close. So he has every interest in the world in prolonging this, and unfortunately, it seems like our government also seems to have an interest in helping him, no matter what. And it really just comes into the conversation of foreign influence in general. I mean,
Well, I was
you
told there was
have.
no foreign influence. I was told APAC is not influencing. That's what I was told, is that they're actually not a foreign lobby. They're a domestic lobby of Americans.
I personally do not understand how APAC actually gets away with not being considered a foreign lobby. I mean, do you actually have any insight into that?
Well, it goes back to John F. Kennedy in the 60s, when he wanted to make them register. At that time, I think it was called the Zionist Council. I can't remember the exact name. It was not called APAC. It was called something, I think the American Zionist Council, something like that.
Yeah,
And, something happened to John. we, we don't know. And then the issue kind of went away, because immediately after Lyndon Johnson took office, the U.S.-Israeli relationship got much, much closer, because Kennedy was much more he scrutinized the Israeli government much more, right? He said, "Hey, I want full reports on the nuclear sites that you're developing, like what's going on." And he felt like he was given the runaround by the Israelis, by their prime minister. I think it was, is it Ehud Barak? No, it was not. It was, I can't remember who is it. Eshkol. I can't remember the prime minister at the
Yeah.
time, but anyways, he felt like he was given the runaround. But as soon as Johnson took over, then relationships got very, very close, and that whole conversation was over. And
Yeah.
then, AIPAC was never forced to register as a foreign lobby. And I think as their strength and over Congress has accumulated over the years, that has never just, that conversation has only been, in kind of alternative media circles, very not within the mainstream. I don't know if I've seen one time in mainstream media, the MSNBC, CNN, or Foxes of the world ask that question to say, hey, why are they not registered as a foreign lobby? Tucker did that in that interview, but he's no longer with mainstream media.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does just beg the question in general. Why does this lobby kind of like have all the different privileges that they have? Why is it that so many people in our government just seem to be constantly trying to go to bat for the state of Israel? We saw that Ted Cruz, thankfully to some organizations like, track AIPAC, showing that Ted Cruz has taken close to $2 million from them during his career. But you don't really need to see those numbers because he will tell you that he is a staunch defender of the state of Israel, and that was his number one goal when he got into Congress, was to make sure that the state of Israel was protected, that he was their biggest protector. So we are constantly dealing with people here in America who want to do basically whatever Israel says. And I feel like this is like one of those like rare moments where the left base and the right base, for different reasons, seem to be on the same page. That nobody wants to actually see a war with, a war where the United States goes in just to help Israel. Like who the hell are they? Why do they need any more of our money? Why do they need our support? I don't
Yeah, we've
understand in
seen
the
this.
first place.
We've seen this play before already, and we
Yeah.
kind of know how it's going to end. And nobody wants it. Nobody wants another foreign war just because we're struggling so badly here. We need to see more domestic investments versus
Yeah.
spending, the minimum. The number is 3 billion a year, but it's much more now because of all of these new things that have developed over the last 2 years with Gaza and now Iran. It's the number is much higher. Ted Cruz, he just said he didn't know the number, so we don't know the number, but it's got to be a lot higher. So that we are uniting in that sense, and I think to your earlier question, you brought up Trump and
Yeah.
what he's going to do about it, right? He's saying he's going to think about it over the next 2 weeks to decide what he's going to do. I think he is kind of torn between his allegiance to Israel, right? He's very close because of the money and his
Yeah.
friends
He's
and
accepted
things like
hundreds of
that,
millions of dollars from them.
right?
Yeah.
From Mary Madelson, but then he's also close personally with Netanyahu. I believe they're friends, and
Yeah,
so
he pulls out the chair for him.
yeah, he does that. So he's stuck between that side versus the other side, where I think Trump still has a good sense of where his base is and where, you know, what people want, and nobody wants that war. So he's trying to decide, okay, what do I want to do here? And I've also heard a number of different times that Trump wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know why he needs that so badly, but if he wants it, he certainly shouldn't be lobbing bombs, or we shouldn't be joining this war, because that would probably eliminate his chances of winning that particular award. So if he can figure out some way to end this diplomatically, that would be ideal. I think he's probably trying to figure something out. I'm not convinced that he's that good of a negotiator. I don't really know. It seems like it's
I
not.
mean, they had the
And the proof
ability
is
to
in the pudding.
negotiate.
He if he
Yeah.
gets it done successfully, then he's a good negotiator. If he doesn't get it done, if he starts to send troops over there, or he starts to send missiles, then I would say then he has failed in this negotiation.
I I honestly don't think that negotiating is one of his strong suits. I mean, just personally speaking, I mean, it seems like he actually had the ability to do so. Iran was planning in good faith to meet with them. They had something scheduled for the week that Israel launched its attack. And, several EU countries have reached out to Iran over the last, week here and asked them, like, why they aren't trying to engage in more diplomacy. And I forget exactly the name of the top person in the Iranian government, but the response was, we were trying to do diplomacy and then we got attacked. So now what's the point of doing diplomacy? And I have to see it from their perspective here. You know, like if I was planning on having a negotiation with somebody, and then somebody within the negotiation decided to bomb my country, my capital, you know, and take out like top members of our military, how would the United States respond in that situation? You know,
There would be
like
no more
seriously,
diplomacy. Yeah, it would be
exactly.
over.
There would be no more diplomacy. So I understand how where Iran's coming from in all this, and truthfully speaking, you know, Donald Trump gets this label as being this anti-war person. He tried to like advocate
Well,
that
it's
for
not a
himself.
label. He literally had campaigned on it. It's not other people attributing that to him. It's him
Right.
saying that overtly over and
Right.
over again.
And we have not seen really any evidence of that. I mean, since he's come in, he's been what leading bombs, you know, bombing campaigns in Somalia, leading bombing campaigns in Yemen, threatening to what annex what Panama, Greenland, Gaza. I mean, it's relentless here. We're not even 6 months in, so I'm very worried. I feel like the only thing that's truly going to keep the United States from getting involved here is public pressure from his own base. And I've been glad to see that there's been a little bit of fracturing. The fact that you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are, it's funny to me that they can never publicly say his name, but it was
Yeah.
still a direct shot at him when she was talking about what America first means and how it doesn't mean going to war for Israel against Iran and how nobody actually cares about what's going on with Iran. And I never thought that I would see her leading the charge of kind of like the public pushback against Donald Trump when in his foreign policy. But I guess there are surprises all over the place, James.
We'll see what happens with that. Yeah, you're right. They don't call him out by name. That's not happened yet, at
No.
least in the MAGA base. I know there are some people who have called him out by name, but we'll have to we'll have to see what's going. I mean I do think that the Republican coalition that they built right now is a bit more independent thinking than maybe I would say the Democratic base is much more, I think, unified or uniform. We can talk about that. I know that's one of your topics that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
I think the MAGA base is a little bit more different in their coalition because he was trying. I mean, he did a good. I mean, if you're talking about trying to win an election, I think he did a good job of bringing together all kinds of different people who may have not agreed on all the issues, but to say, hey, this is the guy that you should go with to get us closer to where you might want to go with your particular issue, whether it be like the anti-war people or whether it be the lower tax people, and then including the Maha people, make America healthy again. So he's bringing together all kinds of different people to say, hey, no, this is the guy for you. And so, from an election standpoint, I think he did a good job. But now, how do you keep that coalition together? Now the rubber has definitely met the road, and he has to make a decision of what he wants to do. And we'll see what he does. I'm not super optimistic about it. I think there probably will be some kind of entanglement. We'll see. But I think as long as, I mean, the difference now, I think, between 2025 and 2003 with Iraq is that there is a much more fractured media ecosystem where it's not just cable news feeding the information. There are
Right.
other voices out there that are pretty prominent, right? You have people on the right, let's say Candace Owens, who gets, I saw the other day, it was immediately 2 minutes of streaming. There was like 100,000 views, a live,
Yeah.
broadcast. And then she'll accumulate millions and millions of views for
On the
that particular,
playbacks. Yeah.
yeah, for that episode. So you didn't have in 2003 that kind of voice being out there saying, hey, no, we shouldn't do this. And there are a number of other different commentators and channels that are kind of speaking out against the war. So now you're not going to be able to get that uniform public um, response to say, hey, no, we do need to do this. It's for the good of America. Now there's a bunch of dissenting voices, and it's much more muddled. And also they also haven't spent a good job of like trying to justify why we need to be there. Right in Iraq, I
Hmm.
think they had like a 1 or 2 year period where they were saying, hey,
Weapons
Saddam
of mass
Hussein,
destruction.
weapons of mass destruction. This is very dangerous. He's
Yeah.
also very tied in with Al Qaeda, 9/11, and so they concocted a story that I guess was plausible enough to get people to go along with it because there was no counter narrative that was powerful enough. I mean, I think there were like bloggers maybe that were speaking out against it, but
No one was really on the internet like that at that time,
yeah,
though.
exactly.
Yeah.
There was not this ecosystem that exists.
Right.
So I don't know if you're going to get all the American people on board with this. And then once the fighting starts, I think in terms of protests, if you want to talk about that, I think I don't think I think that those numbers that we just saw with the ICE protests, the No Kings protests, is going to probably pale in comparison to maybe some of the anti-war protests that we're about to see if we do start sending, especially if we do start sending
Sending troops.
troops over there.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, no, I think there is going to be no doubt in my mind that those protests would be bigger because those protests wouldn't be as, I guess, partisan, so to speak. You would see more of a unified collective here because, again, nobody really wants this war outside of maybe the defense contractors in Northern Virginia and all of the members of Congress who are going to watch their stock portfolios boom from sending troops over to the Middle East to die.